All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the very first episode of my podcast covering the VCT scene, the Monday morning meta. I guess that's what we're going to call it for now. Basically, I just wanted a place to kind of dump my thoughts. I'm watching every single game in all of the regions, and I just wanted to give a place to give some takes, talk about the meta, talk about how teams are doing, and just give my perspective as somebody who's coached and somebody who loves watching Pro Valorant. And it's going to be raw, it's going to be unedited, and hopefully you guys will get some takeaways or learn some stuff from this. At some point I might do this live so I can have like chat interaction, but for now, if you have questions or you want me to talk about something, leave it in a comment down below. And let's just go ahead and get right into it. We're going to start with Pacific. This is the region that I know the best since I coached there last year, and we're just going to go match by match. I took notes on every game as I watched it, and let's just start with GE. So GE played against Gen G, and I think that everybody was fairly high on GE coming into stage one based off what they saw in kickoff. Gen G, like the jury was kind of out. They brought in Foxy9 again, and some people were kind of excited about that. But for me, I think that Gen G have some really serious issues, and they kind of manifested themselves in this game. I don't think that they have a good read on what they're supposed to do with their team. They've got one of the best smokes players in the world in Karon, who is not playing primary smokes. They bring in Foxy9 because Ash was not comfortable on smokes. They put Foxy9 on smokes so that Karon can continue playing Viper. They have Zinx, who, in my opinion, looked pretty good playing the double duelist stuff. Like, I think he can shoot pretty well, and he plays quite aggressive and is maybe like a good kind of like second fiddle to Texture, somebody that you could actually send in and then have Texture trade them potentially. But the roles don't really make a lot of sense. Like on Bind, they're running Yoru, Neon, Brim, Viper, Fade. They have Zinx on the Yoru, which I don't mind. I think that if you had to play Yoru on any of the maps in the current meta post nerf, Bind would be number one, just because I think that the Yoru Waylay stuff that you can do where you double teleport from one side of the map to the other side of the map, you can take a fight, and then you can teleport back using recall and teleport for Yoru. So you can literally just like shift two players from one side of the map to the other and back at will, is really, really powerful. But they didn't do any of that, and they're kind of forcing the Neon here in a comp that I don't really think makes a ton of sense. You got two duelists, you've got a Fade. I mean, it just looked uncoordinated and not very good. Meanwhile, GE is coming in with a bunch of shooters, some interesting ideas. Obviously, we've seen Frost complaining about the meta like every day, basically. And they come in playing Deadlock KO Gecko. Some interesting things to note. We've got Crystal in the Deadlock. This is something that we actually did last year a bit. It's an agent that he really likes, and something that I was trying to kind of experiment with last year was like, how do we get Crystal in a position where he gets the most value out of his playstyle? Because he's not a super aggressive player. He likes to kind of bait a little bit. He likes to kind of like put himself in situations where he can like outthink opponents and outmaneuver them. And I think the Senti role kind of works for him in that way. But yeah, GE looked great playing this comp. They have some pretty big switch ups, obviously moving Autumn to Smokes, Udaton back to Duelist. Another thing that I'm going to talk a little bit more about GE than some of the other teams, just because I know this team a little bit more intimately. One of the big problems that we had last year with Udaton on Duelist is that he wants to go fast a lot of the time, and there were not enough people that were willing to go at his speed and like run in with him and trade him out. And I think that problem has been like pretty much solved with this roster, because I think you've got Autumn, who will run in aggressively on Brimstone because he's also a duelist. You've got Patman, who played with Paper X and knows how to go fast and will run in with him. You've got Javi, who likes to play pretty aggressively. And so then if you have like one or two passive players, but everybody else is going at the speed of the duelist, then it's going to work out. Whereas last year, we kind of had one player who wanted to go fast and nobody else could quite match that tempo correctly, which caused a lot of problems for entering. So I think that this sort of style and this particular like roster of players is going to complement how Udaton wants to play Duelist. And so I would expect them to probably lean into this. I mean, we see it on Split as well. Udaton again playing Duelist, popping off on Raze. Autumn moving over to the Veto, which I think makes a lot of sense. He played a lot of Chamber in his past, and I think, he's like a big op user. And then you have Sava, your Crystal, go back to the Fade here, Patman over the Viper. So you've got a lot of flexibility happening with the GE roster, which obviously is awesome. I love to see that. This is how Frost likes to run his teams, move pieces around to try and sort of like set everybody up on whatever their unique flavor is for each different map, and then potentially switch that up week to week. On the other side of things, we have Genji running honestly one of the worst comps I've ever seen in professional Valorant. You have Viper and Cypher, who literally do the same job on Split. Like every single comp that I've ever seen is either a Viper that creates the A pressure with the wall and the lurking, or the Cypher that uses the cage to do the same thing. And for some reason, Genji decided to run both. So they have a Neon who has zero support. Nobody is going in with him. Then you have a bunch of kind of like passive, like hold space agents. So this, I mean, I don't know who they're beating in scrims to make them want to run this comp, but it is not going to work, and I expect them to change this going into the next week. So just overall sense, I think Genji looked terrible. Like they genuinely looked really, really, really bad. And I think that they probably are going to end up looking bad for most of the stage. So with that being said, I'm definitely super optimistic about how GE looked, but I wouldn't sort of like immediately jump to say, oh, they're one of the best teams in the region. Although I do have them ranked pretty high in Pacific, but I need to see, some better teams. And they've got a very tough group, right? They play Secret next, but then they've got DRX, Nongshim, and PaperX as well to play. Genji, I think we're looking at potentially like a 1-4, 0-5 type of stage, unless they drastically change what they're doing. And yeah, so GE on the rise, Genji falling off, and let's go ahead and move on to the next match, which is T1 and Varel. So this is another fairly one-sided affair. I was very curious to see what T1 did with Izu, because he was like a top 10 player in the world in kickoff on the Yoru, and obviously a lot of teams and a lot of people think that Yoru is like fully dead. So how would they continue to play the game without that Yoru crutch? So it looks like what they're going to do is they're going to have Izu continue to op, which I think makes sense. He seems pretty good at like finding his timings, finding those picks, getting out. They give him the chamber on both maps, Haven and Pearl. And then they have Buzz playing the Neon. Buzz has played the Neon before. He's like a very, very, very aggressive duelist, so it kind of fits his play style. And then they build the rest of their comp kind of around that core. On Haven, they're playing Phoenix with Meteor, which is kind of interesting. I didn't mind it. Sky Astra, definitely a bit of a weird comp. It's sort of like half PaperX, half their own style. And it looked okay. They definitely struggled on defense. I think... Yeah, I mean, I think that this, like, copying PaperX, but then subbing in Sky and Neon doesn't necessarily give you quite the same level of map coverage that you would get from the Yoru. So you're going to have some problems on defense, which, Haven is kind of an attack-sided map anyway, so that makes sense. And then Varel is just a team that's kind of like running around doing random stuff anyway. So it's going to be a very chaotic map when you have this type of comp against how Varel plays the game. But then on Pearl, we move on to a little bit more of a traditional double Senti, actually. This was super popular last year, double Senti, whether it was Vice Killjoy, Chamber +1. I think it's one of the better ways to play Pearl, just because there's so many gaps to mind that having a lot of Sentinel utility, even though the Sentinel class is a little bit nerfed, is pretty good. And obviously the Chamber kind of plays like a duelist to some extent, contacting with the operator on attack and also taking aggressive space on defense. I mean, T1 wins. I wasn't super impressed with them. Like, they're decent, they're good. But I think I was a little bit thrown off by this Haven game because, I mean, I don't think Varel is good. I think Varel has a lot of problems. They look like a tier 2 team to me. They look like a team that is kind of just like running around doing random things. They have some very weird ideas. Some of their ecos, like the way that they manage their economy, was kind of bad. They had some rounds where they were like part of their team was buying, part of their team was saving. It really messed with their eco on Haven a couple of times. And while they do have shooters, it does not look like anybody is consistent on this team other than maybe Zuna. Zuna is definitely good, and he plays the game in like a solid tier 1 way, but I think everybody else on their team is kind of just like taking random fights. There isn't a ton of coordination. And so with that being said, I came out of this a little bit lower on T1 than anything else. Varel I already thought was not very good, and that just kind of confirmed it. T1 we'll have to kind of see. I don't know, who do they play next? They play DFM and then RQ. I mean, honestly, they still could go 5-0 in this group, but I kind of have to see how they develop in week number 2. I think I kind of have them maybe at like number 5 in the Pacific Power Ranking, number 4, something like that. And yeah, let's move on to the next one. Huge banger of a game, the grand finals rematch of the Masters in Santiago. Paper X versus Nongshim. Nongshim ended up dropping it. Paper X takes it 2-1. I picked Paper X to win this game just because I think it's always hard to kind of win that run back after you've already beaten them. And also, I think that Paper X was probably more set up to go into the next phase of the meta because Nongshim was super reliant on the Yoru with Francis. And I was kind of curious to see how they handled that and where they moved him. Now, Francis is really good, and he can play, like, he plays very well on KO. He plays a lot of, like, the flash initiators, so I think they'll be fine. But I was a little bit worried when I saw him playing the Waylay. I don't think it looked super comfortable, although he had one decent map. We had a total banger on Fracture here. Both teams playing, you know, the Breach. Paper X actually playing no like real initiator. they're just sending in their duelist with some breach utility, and I think that's kind of an interesting novel approach to a map where you basically just play attack whether you're on defense or attack. You're just always attacking, and so I guess it's kind of fine. On the other side of things, Nongshim plays the Cypher, which has historically been like the best agent on the map. I think I can even just bring it up real quick. Let's see. Yeah, bring up the win rate of Cypher for all time on Fracture with, let's say, oh, this is meta snapshot. Okay. Yeah, so Fracture Namir win rate all time with a decent sample size. All data on. Okay, most played is Cypher, and also he's the #1 ranked Sentinel. Now, this is obviously tier 2 data on as well. If we go to tier 1 data, it's a little bit different, but still the most played. And so, yeah, Cypher good. Killjoy is also solid. I think you have to play some sort of Sentinel on this map because you really need to know like which side the defense is pushing out on. And anyway, this was just like super brawly, back and forth, really fun game to watch. Moving on to Split, this definitely could have been a 2-0 for Nongshim. They had opportunities to win this. They got, I believe, thriftied once at some point, or maybe that was on Lotus, but this is a very, very back and forth game also on Split. Paper X made some really nice plays. They did a lot of their Paper X stuff, like hero moments, clutches at the right time. They went back to sort of like super old school Paper X style, playing the Jet and Raze double duelist, which I also think makes a decent amount of sense. If something doesn't feel super comfortable playing the Waylay on this map, just put them on Jet. They're basically going to do the same thing. It also maybe is like future-proof prepping them for the Waylay nerfs that are coming in week 4. And also, I just want to talk about that real quick. Why is Pacific waiting like 2 or 3 extra weeks to do this nerf to Waylay? It makes no sense. It's really, really bad for the game. They really just like, if they're gonna do these little tweaks, they need to implement it immediately into the game, in my opinion. Obviously, bigger stuff like, you know, full roster nerfs or map changes or new agents, stuff like that. Sure, you can wait a while, but if it's like a small little tweak, just put it in the game immediately, because now you've got Pacific that is like, they're going to be scrimming with a character that doesn't function the same way that they're going to be playing on the tournament client for like multiple weeks, and that is really stupid. I really don't like that, and I think that honestly, this is probably PaperX just being like, hey, we're not going to play the Waylay, even though it's technically allowed, because we don't want to practice something that we actually can't even practice normally, because you can't even play it in ranked. You can't play it on the regular client. You can only play it on Tournament Realm, and people are not going to be scrimming you on Tournament Realm, so you can use the old Waylay. It's super weird. Regardless, I think this was the map where I felt a little bit worried about Francis on the Waylay. I didn't think it looked super good. Danby had a little bit of an off series. I think he was getting caught out a little bit more than normal. But overall, I mean, you can still see that Nongshim is really good, and you can also see that PaperX is really good. I still have these two sort of like top two. I think I have PaperX at number 1 in Pacific at the moment, Nongshim number 2. And then on Lotus, this is the one where, you know, very back and forth again on the first half. We've got PaperX just going back to their comp, except swapping something on the Yoru for the Neon. I think this makes a decent amount of sense. It's comfort for them. And over here, again, I was a little bit disappointed to see Nongshim running the Waylay here, just because, in my opinion, they had one of the better Lotuses when they were playing like Neon Deadlock, or some of the other looks that they had in 2025. And so I think going to the double duelist, like to try and force the meta, was not my favorite, but they still gave themselves some pretty good chances to win this map. Really just in the second half, they get bonused, and then PaperX just kind of runs away with the momentum there. But this was 6-6 at half, a very, very even series across the way. Going forward, I am very confident that PaperX is going to end near or at the top of the group. Nongshim, I'm a little bit more concerned, because I think they leaned a little bit too heavily into that Yoru as far as like how they function as a team. And so I could see them, I think they'll still make playoffs, and they could definitely still make the next Masters. But I think that it's going to take them a little bit of time to figure out like who they are in this new meta. Okay, let's move on to Full Sense and DFM. So the return of Cruz on IGL, this is great to see. And immediately Full Sense looked good. I expected them to be good. They are just, they're just the talent team that they were, basically. Lots of very, very high firepower players, and then Cruz's IGLing clearly a huge upgrade over what Jit Boys was doing. No shade to Jit Boys, it's just very hard to jump in an IGL if you haven't really done it before. And Cruz has a good history of playing the game in that role. So they just kind of dominated DFM, and realistically, I expected this to happen. DFM was another team that relied very heavily on the Yoru having Yatsuka, who's sort of like a Sentinel flex. It's interesting that he's playing Initiator here, because he was definitely a Sentinel player in Tier 2 Japan last year, and he was very, very good on like the Cyphers and the Killjoys and the Vipers. So he is now playing Initiator while Akame plays the Sentinel. And I think that there's definitely a bit of coordination issues for this team. I mean, Mei is good. Yatsuka is good. Like the players in DFM are pretty good, but they definitely got tier gapped skill wise by Full Sense, and they definitely got macro tier gapped as well. I don't want to like send DFM fans into the pit of despair, but they are going to have, I think, probably a bit of a rough split, with Zeta looking good, which we'll get to in a second here. But yeah, I mean, Full Sense looks good. DFM looks pretty rough, and we'll kind of have to see how their trajectory develops. Okay, moving on to Team Secret and DRX. I think everybody was kind of just saying DRX is going to steamroll this, and after map 1, it definitely looked like that's what's going to happen. Hyunmin on the Phoenix, Freeing on the Neon. Kind of an interesting look. Freeing has played like a lot of more passive roles. Teo, Viper, Vice, these types of things. So seeing him on the Neon was kind of interesting. Yang on the Chamber. Kind of just like a whatever factor. I think that DRX is still kind of like trying to figure out who they are post flashback. I don't think that Hermes was a good fit. Yang is remains to be seen, but they definitely don't feel like quite the same level of team that they were when they had flashback, sort of like complementing Hyunmin. And so I'm not super sure where they're going. I would say like maybe they're looking at like a third place in this group, something like that, third or fourth potentially. Um, Hyunmin, they've got good players. They've got good players. Everybody on this team can shoot. But they definitely don't sort of like give me that real feeling of like, oh, this is a team that could potentially win the region. I don't get that feeling out of DRX right now, and they've sort of lost their innovation as well because the Yoru Waylay stuff is obviously no longer in the game. And so I think they kind of need some time to figure out what their best approach is. On Fracture, it was a very close game, actually. I think Secret probably should have won this, and we could have gone to map 3. I think that DRX probably still wins in 3 maps, but this actually made me a little bit excited for Secret, weirdly. I think that they played pretty well on Fracture. I think this is a team that is, they're just going to be scrapping with teams. I think they have a little bit of upset potential in this group. They're probably not going to have much chance of going to playoffs regardless, but it's nice to see Kelly S, obviously another one of my former players, playing pretty well, shooting pretty well. There's definitely some like really rough Jesse Vash whiffs in this one. And I think that unfortunately they just aren't probably not going to be able to like punch with everybody else in their group. Rimuru, again, the jury is out. It's just like another young duelist player who just kind of runs in, dies a lot, but does make space for the team. Berserks, I think, is a good player. Sylvan is solid. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I think Secret has some upset potential, but I'm not super positive on them. Maybe a little bit more down on DRX, honestly, but I didn't hate either one of these teams during this game, as weird as that is to say. And then finally, the last match of this week was RQ versus Zeta Division. This one was really interesting. Zeta came out swinging, and I mean, Absol looked like the absolute truth for the first 2 maps. He was completely destroying RQ. Dropping a +15 on the Neon, looking like he was literally playing a different game at a different speed than everybody else. We had some really good moments from Sugar Zero and Echo. Shota had some good moments as well. Just the entire Zeta Division team looked like they were really playing together well. I think their teamwork was the most impressive thing to me on this map. It looked like they were just like way better coordinated than RQ, and they just had like all the right ideas, good calls, good mid-rounding. It made me very excited, actually, for Zeta Division going forward into this season. And then on Fracture, they get out to a lead again, and then, unfortunately, they just kind of can't play defense. I think that this looked like they hadn't spent that much time on Fracture, or maybe the play style of just always kind of like running it down and like getting into this chaotic brawls is not their best state of play, because they looked pretty lost at times, like in the chaotic rounds, and you could see that RQ's better structure and just like better experience and players who are kind of just willing to let the other team make mistakes into them was really picking them apart on this map. RQ, I think, has done a pretty good job recognizing that Munyet functions best as their entry, and they are just going to have Jemkin play sort of that secondary focus on the op, trade out Munyet, and especially on Haven, they put Jemkin on the Killjoy, Munyet on the Neon, and I think it works probably better that way. I will say that Zeta probably should have won Haven. They probably should have won the series, but it was very close either way. Again, I think that this is a team that I'm actually really excited to see how they develop over the course of the season, because I think they're going in the right direction. Echo and Absol look like they definitely can kind of like punch with some of the better duelists in the league. And I'm a little bit, always a little bit hesitant with Zeta Division's like overall firepower as a team, but I thought they played quite well. And like specifically on Split, their teamwork and the way that they were coordinated made me very confident that this team actually does know what they're doing. RQ, obviously, they kind of bailed themselves out with some hero rounds on Haven. They got a bunch of like multi frags out of Xfiro and Jemkin that kind of turned the tides on really big like eco or inflection point moments. And so I think RQ is kind of just like who they've always been, which is they are a solid structural fundamental team. They kind of play their own tempo and they rely on big individual plays to kind of bail them out sometimes. And they also are a team that always has potential to maybe like go on a run as far as like winning the region, but I think more than likely they'll probably end up making playoffs comfortably, maybe somewhere in that like fourth or fifth place type of spot, just as far as what I've seen so far. So real quick before we go on to the next region, I just want to take a look at the meta. Well, 82% Neon, 39% Waylay, 39% Omen, Viper, Brim, Sky, Fade, Astra. We've got one team playing the Yoru, only one team playing the Vice, one team playing the Deadlock, no Sage, no Harbor. Yeah, I mean, this region is super, super double duelist, double duelist with the Neon pilled. And I think one thing that is very, very potentially worrying that we should keep an eye on is that every single map is like incredibly attack sided except for Split. So yeah, this is definitely something to just keep an eye on because Fracture 55%, Pearl 57%, obviously Split 45, Bind 57%, Haven 71%, Lotus with only one game played. I mean, the sample size is small, but if every single map in the pool is super, super attack sided because everybody is just running only attack comps with like no thought to the defense, then there's a huge sort of gap to exploit, or potentially the game is just completely fucking broken and unbalanced. I'm always in the camp of like it's an opportunity to exploit, and there will probably be teams that figure out like, okay, if we just have like good defense, we can probably win an attack because nobody can play defense because they have no defensive capability in their comp. So we'll just kind of have to see how the meta develops. Overall, next week, going on to the pick'ems. See, I got all of them right this week. Next week, I have T1 over DFM, Nongshim over DRX. I think this one is fairly 50-50, but I'm definitely still going to go with Nongshim. GE should take care of Secret. RQ should beat Vero pretty easily. Full Sense over Zeta. Definitely a little bit of upset potential for Zeta, but I think Full Sense will just kind of like tear gap them. And then this one could get very ugly just because I think that Genji is in trouble and PaperX looks like they're on kind of like hitting on all cylinders. So those are my pick'ems for Pacific. And let's go ahead and move on to China. So China had a lot of games. I'm just going to kind of breeze through like the top line stuff for each of these teams. Don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do like covering this region because I think there is some interesting stuff happening here. So AG kind of squeaks by TEC. Very, very close series, actually. I was fairly impressed with TEC. I think AG is having a little bit of sort of like post Yoru malaise, like post Santiago. They didn't look super clean or super prepped. They still win. I think they've got some pretty good players on their team. Oh, one thing that is really important to note about AG is that they have benched AU1, who was their sort of like Viper Sentinel player, in favor of having their assistant coach, IGL, on that role so that Kira, who was their IGL playing duelist, can now move over to Sentinel. And then they have, sorry, I misspoke. They have their assistant coach IGLing on sort of like flex. You can see that he's September playing Omen, then he's playing Gecko, then he's playing Astra. And I think this is a pretty big downgrade for their team. You can see he went minus 18. He definitely did not look at the same level as the rest of the players on this team. Shrimp is good. Fangir's good. Kira's solid. IMGRQ is, he's hit or miss, but they definitely have like potential to be a solid team. But I think that they have downgraded their team. So I'm not super confident in them in stage one. I just think that AU1 was good, and I think that they now have like a glaring weakness as far as their firepower. So it's something to kind of keep an eye on. Nova has done a bit of an overhaul, and they look like they need like at least a month of just straight practice with no games. Unfortunately, China's doing a bunch of super weeks, so Nova is basically already eliminated from stage one, which is kind of unlucky. At the same time, we had EDG coming back with Gianni, and he looked good. He was kind of running it down and playing quite well, playing aggressively alongside Kong Kong. They play a little bit of Harbor. This is just a huge stop. This is more so Nova being bad than EDG being good, but I mean, we'll kind of see. Maybe Jenny was the answer all along for EDG. Moving on to JDG and FPX. So JDG is a team that I keep thinking is going to be really good because they have a ton of firepower. Stu is insane. Jay is really good. They beat FPX, and FPX has made some moves as well. Benelli and Kovac coming in alongside Setrad, who came in at the beginning of the year. And honestly, this is a team that they've got some like good shooters. I think Kovac is probably a good upgrade for them. He looks solid on this team, and honestly, this team, I think FPX might actually be pretty good by the end of the stage, or maybe by stage 2. I think they're kind of on the rise. JDG, on the other hand, while they did beat FPX in week 1, they looked really bad in week 2, which we'll get to in a second. And so I think that JDG, my stocks for them are just very much like, they're just mid. I don't know exactly what's wrong with the team. They just seem like, yeah, they're not like developing at the rate that I was hoping that they would. Meanwhile, Dragon Ranger Gaming and Gilai played, and this was, you know, it was just Gilai being a good team. They're solid. I think they take advantage of a lot of the things that China teams tend to do wrong, as far as like over aggression, not having the best macro reads, not having the best coordination. And Gilai does those things much better than most of the teams in their region. So they kind of pick them apart. Happy Way looking insane. We've got some wild stuff out of Nathan D, the coach of DRG. We've got a mix Omen comp with Double Duelist, trying to just go fast, run it down. I think it's kind of an interesting idea, but the mix looked terrible. And overall, DRG looked pretty rough. Vukashu on smokes is okay. He's definitely better on that Senti role. And bringing in Life is maybe not going to be the upgrade that people hoped. He's had a pretty rough year, honestly. Lots of deaths, not a lot of value. So we'll kind of have to see where DRG end up. They did get a tune-up game right afterwards against Nova that they just completely stomped. But again, I really think that Nova is like, there's probably not many tier 2 teams that wouldn't beat Nova right now, as like unfortunate as that is to say for the team. They're just in a rough spot. Wolves and Trace. This one was something that I thought was going to be kind of close, but Wolves looks like they need some time. They brought in Glacier, who I believe is Spring's cousin, if I remember correctly, and he looks fine. He's got good aim, good mechanics, but he definitely looks like he's not on the same page as the team sometimes. Spring back to Viper and Smokes, I think, is very good. I'm excited to see that. I did not like seeing him go back to Duelist. I think he has had some of the most impact on this Viper role, or like the Smokes kind of anchor of anybody in China. So I'm very excited to see him back here. But yeah, this team, they haven't really been able to recapture that magic that they had last year. And with all the roster moves and stuff kind of switching around, maybe stage 2 will be their stage. I don't think it's going to be this one. On the other side of things, Trace, they looked solid. They dropped Feng Feng for Jalele, I believe, and they looked solid. Delby is very good. He seems to be kind of rounding into form. They played some Veto on Lotus, which looked pretty solid. Not the most complex ideas, but definitely had some good stuff. And they are one of the better bind teams in China, and they looked like it, even though they're playing just the meta comp. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely impressed by Trace in this series, more so than I was disappointed by Wolves, but also a little disappointed in Wolves. I think they just kind of looked like uncoordinated and like not very much on the same page. Tyloo Billy was a big game because Tyloo has kind of been my team on the rise this year in China, and Billy has kind of been like that top dog. Obviously, they had some issues in stage one with K Knight's health kind of nerfing their chances of going to Santiago, even though they look like they probably should. And so this was a big, interesting game for me. Went all three maps. Tyloo winning on bind, mirror comp essentially with the Astra instead of the Brim for BLG. Didn't work out too well. Pearl, we had Phoenix Tejo Neon, kind of an interesting look from them. They kind of ran over Tyloo. Tyloo playing double duelist chamber fade Astra. They didn't look very good on this map. Splash continues to be a very, very strong looking player. Honestly, all of Tyloo is incredibly talented. Scales looks great. Slowly's always been good. ERV looks solid. Splash looks insane. And Sword9 is kind of like the rock, the cornerstone of this team. They ended up beating BLG, and they did so in fairly decisive fashion on Breeze. You can see Scales had a massive game, plus 11, 26, and 11, 26 and 15. And Yilai did not deliver on the Neon. So my main issue for BLG is that they have like two very inconsistent players. Rushia sometimes is the best aimer in the world, and sometimes he is completely lost. And Eli also seems to be very inconsistent because he was not hitting in this series, but in their second series, he was looking pretty good. Neff is playing at an incredibly good level, and then YZ and Knight are both very solid players as well. Tyloo wins this. I think these teams are going to be kind of fighting for that top spot with XLG. I would say XLG, BLG, and Tyloo are probably the three best teams in China right now. Based off of what I have seen, we did have Tyloo beating Titan Esports, but again, TEC playing very close games, super close on split, and then Tyloo kind of running away with Fracture. Again, Tyloo is just a team. They're like the Paper Rex of China. Honestly, they just are just running it down. They just run it down. Every round is aggressive, and not many teams in China have been able to stop their momentum. But yeah, I think TEC has been a little bit impressive to me in terms of like how close they played some of these teams. But Tyloo definitely is just a better team, more skilled overall. Wolves get stalked by EDG. Again, it's like Wolves, they need some time. EDG, they're okay. I think I'm excited to see them play against a better team because I feel like they've played the two worst teams in their region so far. And so once we see them against, like a Gili or a BLG, how are they actually going to hold up? And my thought is they probably will not win, but they're EDG and they always have some chance. Trace against Gili. Trace probably should have won this game. You can see that on bind, they had a big 9-3 lead, and then they just could not win around on defense. Gili had a very solid Lotus. Again, Trace could not play defense. They got thrifted in the second half, and then XLG kind of ran away with it. Happy Way continues to be unbelievable. WS Leo has been very, very solid for this team. And then just in general, XLG, like I keep saying, they're just a very solid team. And what they do and how they play the game takes advantage a lot of the mistakes that Chinese teams make. Again, I think I'm pretty high on Trace coming out of this as well because they played Shilai so close. So I would probably put, Shilai in that like top two, Trace probably somewhere in like 5-6 somewhere as far as China power rankings go. And we'll kind of have to see. Like I do hope that Trace continues to develop because I think that they do have potential on this team. And I think they certainly could go to playoffs and then maybe make a run for a master spot. And then finally, we had BLG against JDG to close out the week. Lots of games played, and you can see Neff just absolutely carried. This was like one of the best games I've ever seen Neff play. He was truly unbelievable. Had the perfect read at all times, made so many good individual plays, won them so many rounds by himself, and really just kind of carried this entire game. I think that JDG looked fairly outmatched in terms of like the macro. They did not look like they were really in the game at any point. You can see 13-4 on Haven, 13-6 on Fracture. It was not close, and this definitely made me drop JDG down quite a bit in my expectations. I think that they just, I don't know, they just did not look like a good, well coordinated team. And maybe it was because BLG was playing so well, but they looked like they were like super outmatched in this game. So that boosted my BLG stocks quite a bit, but maybe it's just that JDG is kind of falling off. Maybe they're tilted. I don't really know. It was not a pretty series though. And so I think moving into the next, again, another big super week, we look at the pick'ems. You can see I forgot to do pick'ems for week 1. But in week 2, I've got Tyloo over FPX. I think this is actually a little bit of a scary game for Tyloo, based off of what I've seen from FPX. So definitely want to keep an eye on. BLG should be able to handle Titan Esports unless both Rushia and Eli are playing like really inconsistently bad. But I think they'll win this pretty easily. This is going to be gross. Avert your eyes from this series. This is not going to be a pretty one. Eli will win for sure. Trace, EDG, I think this is going to be a very, very good game. Totally depends on the map pool. Depends on if Trace can keep their sort of consistent form. I'm really interested. I have them beating EDG, but I think it could go either way. Very 50-50. AG should beat JDG based off of what I've seen. But again, JDG always has that sort of like firepower trump card where they could just all be hitting. And I think if they are, I think they do have potential to out firepower AG. But I think AG's structure should be able to beat JDG. DRG should beat Wolves, but also this one I'm not super confident on just because I do think that Wolves is kind of moving in the right direction. And DRG is a little all over the place as they tend to be as a team. Honestly, this one could go either way. I'm going to go with DRG, but I would not be surprised to see Wolves win this. Trace will beat Nova. Not too much to say there. BLG probably should beat FPX. If FPX beats Tyloo, this one becomes very, very interesting because it means that FPX has a chance to kind of like make a run for the top spot in the group. But I think if they lose this, then they probably will lose to BLG as well. AG versus Tyloo. Now, this one is a little bit of a hot take. I think that Tyloo, their style is potentially something that could be abused by how AG plays the game. Obviously, the firepower stuff is a little bit, it's Tyloo probably has the best firepower in the region. So maybe they can just run over AG, but also AG did very, very well in kickoff by abusing the way that Chinese teams play and just picking them apart. I think they're pretty good at taking care of aggressive teams. And so I went with AG in this one. But again, this definitely could be a Tyloo victory, and Tyloo could just kind of run the table and run over everybody. EDG versus DRG. Again, kind of a coin flip, as most of the DRG games are, I think, just because you don't really know which DRG you're going to get. But I'm going to favor EDG here just because I think that DRG is like a little bit lost in the sauce as far as their comps go. And this is just going to be a mess. This is going to be a brawly mess, I think. And I think I would favor Kong Kong in that type of game. Although Vukashu could drop like 70 kills and DRG could win because of that. TEC over JDG. Again, just kind of like taking a punt here. I was not impressed with what I saw from JDG. TEC has played some good teams close, so I went with them. And then Gli will beat Wolves for sure. So that's my pick'ems for China, week number 2/3/4, whatever, because they're playing these super weeks. And we'll go on to EMEA now. Quick little water break. EMEA was sick. My pick'ems were not good for this. because there was a lot of interesting movement from some of these teams. Let's go to Fnatic versus Eternal Fire first. This was a very fun game to watch. It was great to see Echo come in for Eternal Fire and show the potential that we saw from him in Ascension. And then Fnatic did some interesting stuff. Alphier ISO, Boaster Harbor on Breeze, barely squeaked this one out. This one was like, Echo was just finding incredible timings, doing so much work. Fnatic, a little bit of a slow starter. They went down 0-6 and were able to barely scrape this one back. I think this map alone really kind of made me a little bit excited to watch Eternal Fire, because this is a team that has like incredibly high firepower, and they could potentially snowball some of these teams in EMEA. I think Fnatic is like one of the teams that is able to kind of weather that storm, and they were, I mean, again, this very easily could have been a 2-0 either way, right? Fnatic could have lost this 2-0. Eternal Fire could have lost this 2-0. Eternal Fire is able to squeak out the bind. I don't necessarily think that the double duelist... So one thing I will say about this double duelist... Ooh, and actually I forgot about the China meta. We'll go back to that after this. But the thing about the double duelist... If everybody's playing like Neon Waylay or Neon Phoenix or whatever, and both teams are just running at each other on defense, on attack, it's like a lot of it is just site hit, retake, brawl in the middle of the map. Those tend to be very chaotic, very coin flippy situations, because it kind of is just like who is hitting their shots in the chaos. A lot of the strategy kind of goes out the window, and it's just raw aim. And like teamwork and micro comms and stuff like that. So not too surprised to see Fnatic lose this against a team that is very, very good at aiming. But also, Alphier was doing insane stuff. And realistically, both of these teams looked solid on both of the first two maps. So I think big stock upgrade for Eternal Fire, and for me, no panic for Fnatic. I think that Fnatic's going to be in a good spot. I think the one thing is like Kayak is definitely not quite the same player on Neon that he is on, the Yoru in the past, but he's good. Like he's going to be fine. Going on to Lotus, they play the Fnatic comp, just swapping out the Waylay for the Raze, which makes sense. Waylay does very similar stuff to what Raze does, and is kind of just like the better agent currently because of the escape mechanic and the better ultimate for the team stuff. But you get to see Fnatic Lotus. Eternal Fire tries to go with Veto, and it does not look very good. They did not really have any good Veto stuff. And this comp right here, the Fnatic comp, is extremely good against aggressive teams. Like this comp was literally built to beat aggressive teams. And so if you are playing too aggressively into this comp, you're going to get completely rolled. So Fnatic destroyed them. Kind of interesting to see them still playing the Killjoy over the Vice on this map, but they've been the best Lotus team in the world since it came out. So, no real notes for them there. Honestly, I think Eternal Fire has upset potential against basically every team in their group. And Fnatic looks like they probably will continue to build into like a top 2, top 3 team in the region by the end of the stage. So yeah, real quick, I just want to go back and look at the Chinese meta. We can just see, again, like 80% pick rate for Neon, 64% for Waylay. It's like a very, 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 very similar meta to Pacific, which makes sense. They scrim each other a lot. They're probably like stealing ideas from Pacific a bunch. Interesting stuff on the win rate side of things. Way different than Pacific. Although Lotus attack-sided, Bind attack-sided, as you would expect. Breeze, pretty even. Fracture, very defensive-sided, which is super weird. Pearl, defense-sided, I mean, kind of makes sense. Split, 50-50. Haven, 50-50. So I don't know if this is like the teams are not playing the double duelist that well. If they're just kind of all brawling in the middle of the map and not really focusing on the right parts of the map, or Yeah, it's kind of interesting to not see it super attack sided considering how much double duelist is being played here. But China's always a little bit interesting in that regard. So, moving on in EMEA, Team Liquid versus Karmine Corp. Now, I was optimistic about Karmine Corp, cautiously optimistic, I should say. I do think that Narrate coming back is a good move for him. And they have a lot of firepower on this team, but what else do they have is the question. And Liquid, coming off of Santiago where they went out, but also for me, Liquid is a very interesting team. They're kind of like they've kind of become like that gatekeeper of EMEA, where if you are not that good of a team, you will lose to Liquid all of the time. And Liquid always has punching chances against like the top teams. They will beat the bad teams, and they will sometimes lose to the other teams that are kind of at their level. Um, Mini Boo on the Neon makes a lot of sense. Camo slotting more so into that secondary duelist in a lot of cases also makes sense since he played duelist for most of his career. On Haven, playing kind of an interesting, I don't even know what this comp is really. Double duelist with a Sky. Definitely an interesting look. I mean, Purpo, I think his most comfortable initiator is Sky, so it makes sense because of that. This comp from Karmine Corp, Fade Tejo seems to be sort of like their main idea. They put Dacia on the Omen, which he has looked incredible on, and he looked unbelievable in this game. They put Levin on the Jet, and that's basically the only agent that he's looked good on in his entire pro career, which is a little bit like a little rough. I mean, he had some okay Yoru stuff in I think the off season, but if you look at his all time, like none of the other duelists are above a 1 rating except for Jet. So and ISO randomly. But yeah, definitely worried about his map his agent pool. I feel like if he can only play Jet, I mean obviously you kind of lean into that, but also what does that mean for the future of your career if you can only play one agent well? Definitely needs some time to develop as a player. I think he's only like 19, so don't want to like say his career is over if he can't learn anything else, because he definitely can, but he has not really developed that much in terms of his agent pool over the last year, so that's kind of concerning. And then the big thing for me is that Sugetsu looked terrible. He looked really, really bad in this series, which is surprising because he's kind of been like the rock of this team alongside Dacia. And he looked pretty lost. He was taking some bad fights. He had the most first deaths on the team. On that Vice role was kind of supposed to be like the anchor. They played Vice on both maps. They played the Fade Tejo Vice on both maps. It didn't work. It didn't look particularly good. Narrate coming over and playing the Fade. I mean, that's where he had a lot of success. He played like what Raze, Fade, some Gecko and stuff like that for them when he played on the team last year when he was good. But one of the discussions that I've seen about Narrate is that he's like a really good rifler and kind of like a second in rifler. And I think I agree with that. And he was playing, kind of just like full support initiator in this series. So we'll see if they kind of adjust the approach a little bit. But yeah, I mean, KC probably going to be looking more so at like a split 2, as long as they just, keep the roster, keep developing. I think split 1 is going to be pretty rough for them. Meanwhile, Team Liquid, I mean, they looked solid. That's all I can really say. They look solid. They're playing aggressively. They seem to kind of like found their new aggressive identity, which, it makes sense. They've got a young Pacific player on Smokes. They've got 3 duelists on their team, because people might not remember, but Purpo was like a primary duelist. So they have Camo, who is a duelist, Purpo, who is a duelist, Minibu, who is a duelist. And then you've got a Pacific Smokes player. And then you've got Nats, who's like the most sort of like slow, cerebral, but also aggressive lurker. So they've got a very interesting mix of players on their team, and they seem to be kind of leaning into that duelist identity, which, I mean, good on them if it works. I'm sure that some teams will kind of figure out their recipe, but for now, I think Liquid might be able to ride this, because at least based off of kickoff, the aggressive teams were the ones that were winning a lot, and EMEA didn't really have the answer to them initially. So we'll see. Vitality versus Giants. This was a beatdown. Durka looked insane. He might be, as weird as this is to say, Durka might be the most underrated duelist in Tier 1 because I feel like we just keep hearing about all these other duelists. You know, this guy's young and cracked. This guy's insane. Oh, the Yoru, the Martine. Obviously, Martine was incredible. But Durka has just consistently been really, really, really good. And he continues to look really, really, really good playing the Neon on both maps, stomping Giants. Giants, they're kind of just who they've always been. They had a good run, initially. At the end of last year, they looked okay at kickoff, and they looked pretty outmatched here. I think they have some consistency issues. Westside has always been pretty consistent. Flickless is good. Cloud's been consistent. Aura has been very inconsistent on this team. And I think Grabinho is also pretty inconsistent. Sometimes he's great. Sometimes he's feeding. Aura is very hit or miss, whether he has the op or not. So this was a nice kind of warm-up series for Vitality. They didn't really look challenged at any point. And I'm excited to see them play Fnatic next. That's going to be a very interesting game. They looked really good. Gentlemates versus Foot. Now, this one was very interesting. Obviously, we get Sop and Sociable coming over to Foot. And man, those changes, plus having Yedijay and Zeus on this team, like this team is scary in terms of how good they can shoot. Meanwhile, Mates was definitely trying to figure things out. They put Martine on Phoenix on 2 maps and Waylay on 1. And it's just as simple as, there's a stat actually that I looked up. I was so curious because I saw Martine had a negative series, like KD wise. And I was curious whether he had one in any recent games. And it's actually been since July of last year. So partway through split 2 of last year, that his last negative KD series was. That includes off-season events. There was one single map BO1 where he had like -1 in Project Blender, but every other series he's played has been positive, and he's been on Yoru on most of those. So definitely a bit of an adjustment for them here. Mini, it was good to see Mini back in good form. He had a bit of a fall off at Santiago, so not too surprised to see him, coming back into good form because he's a good player. Beepo definitely will. I mean, he's doing what he's always done, which is to make space for the team, but they didn't have nearly the same level of capitalization on that space, it felt like, without the Yoru. Martine definitely didn't get quite the same value out of the Waylay that we've seen other people get out of the Waylay. He looked a little bit uncomfortable on it. Starkzo looked a little bit, taking too many chances to try and make up for the fact that his team was not playing that well. And they got punished quite a bit by Foot just being in insane form. I mean, Sociable was unbelievable. IGLing, playing smokes, coming over from a team, taking over the reins, and just destroying. Zeus plus Sop plus Yedijay plus Sociable is scary. I mean, this team can really outshoot basically any team in EMEA if they're all on. Sop's debut was not like a complete hard carry, but he doesn't necessarily need to on this team. And so I'm definitely interested to see how this team develops now. I wouldn't say that they're just immediately, title contenders. They're not necessarily going to just like take on Fnatic and Vitality, but they definitely have a chance to, make playoffs and do something interesting. We'll kind of have to see. Also, like I said, I think Mates is definitely pretty nerfed in this series. They looked like not the same level of team that they were at Santiago and in kickoff. And so I think they kind of still need to figure out what they're doing. Who do they play next, actually? Who does Foot play next? They play Na'Vi. I mean, this is going to be very interesting. Na'Vi is another team that's sort of like, punching for that like top 4. So let's go on and talk about them, actually. Heretics versus Na'Vi. This is this is a wild series. This is one of the better series that I've watched in a while as far as entertainment value. Heretics wins Pearl. They look like they are, pretty clearly the better team. They've got some interesting harbor stuff with Benji Fishy. Comeback heavy on the chamber. I think this makes a lot of sense. He is a very, very, very good Opper Scopes player. He was not comfortable what they had him doing in stage one, or in kickoff rather. They seem to have just been like, all right, Woot, you're just the entry duelist. Come back as the Opper. We're just going to run with that. Benji Fishy playing a lot of smokes was kind of interesting, like the Harbor. Just because for me, Harbor is a little bit more of like a duelisty type of smokes agent. But I guess Boo is your other smoker, and he's not that aggressive of a player, so it kind of makes sense to have Benji, I guess, play that. Rien's, a little questionable on the Sky compared to what the level that he shows on like the Fade and the Sova. Um, but I'm sure this team will be fine. Overall, this series came down to just hero plays and clutches. Um, Lotus, realistically, I think Heretics probably should have won, but they lost a 1v5 into a 1v4, and both to Chloric, who was playing collegiate like 2 months ago, and he looked incredible for Navi. Obviously, Hero and Ruxic looked incredible. Another big storyline here is that Kalasha stepping in for Exit because he couldn't get a visa immediately. So Kalasha he was playing on Boars, who's like a tier 2, tier 3 Ukrainian team. And so he stepped in last minute, very, very tough to come in and just, play at the same level. So the -23, it is what it is. Like, he did his job and the team played around the situation. But yeah, I mean, for me, the big thing is like, I really feel like Heretics should have won this series, but they didn't because the incredible hero rounds and incredible, just like individual moments from Navi carried them over the line. So where does that leave both of these teams, right? You've got a team that played with a stand-in and still won versus a team that probably should have won if they didn't just completely throw on Lotus. And I came out of this one fairly optimistic about both of these teams. As long as Heretics' mental doesn't crumble because of this loss, I think that they're doing a relatively good job with what they are working with and the direction that they're going in. As long as Rian can kind of like find his footing a little bit on the Sky, as long as Woot can just continue to like do his job of going in aggressively, leaning on the comeback operator, I think they'll probably be fine. But also losing to a team with a stand-in is pretty rough, and especially losing because of poor discipline for a team that's been playing together for quite a long time is also pretty rough. But at the same time, Navi has some insane shooters, right? Hero is incredible, Ruxic is incredible, Chloric was incredible, and then Filu was doing a really nice job just playing like that op role. And so I think even if like the thing is with Navi, even if Exit comes in and he's the same level as Kalasha, which I think he probably will be higher because they went out and got him for a reason, that this team has a very good chance of, punching for that top four. At the same time, Heretics probably also can punch for the top four. So it's a little bit of an ambiguous result, in my opinion, based off of this series. Okay, last series of the week, BBL versus Pacific. And again, kind of ambiguous. I mean, Pacific were always going to be probably towards the bottom of EMEA. They just, they got their roster yoinked by BBL at the beginning of the season. They've been kind of putting pieces together. I thought they looked okay. 7 continues to be a very bright spot for this team coming over from North America. CNED, he's fine. Cuprit, Alorante, a little hit or miss. Ninja, a little hit or miss. This team is just like, they've got good players. They're just kind of inconsistent. They've got some interesting ideas. But the big story here for me was that BBL, they took care of business, but they also showed some cracks. I think that not having that super, super, super heavy Yoru op, teleporting across the map, fixing their macro, is something to keep an eye on. BBL is obviously still a good team. They've got very good players. They can all shoot. But I think that some of the things that they were doing with their playstyle of, just like taking both mains, kind of executing both sites, everybody's walking around taking ones. A lot of that benefited from having the Yoru that could be everywhere. And now they're really going to have to figure out like who Lover's Rock is. Like, what is his role in this team? How does he fit in? Is Larock just permanently the entry duelist, and Lover's Rock is going to kind of like complement that? How is this team actually going to kind of evolve into the next step? I think they'll probably be fine, but also this is a team that I would not be surprised to kind of have some teething issues. I don't necessarily know that they will make the next Masters. I think they might kind of end up in the middle of the pack, based off of just pure skill, and they might sort of have to kind of reinvent themselves this stage to be ready for stage 2 and potentially try to make a run to champs that way. So overall, EMEA was probably the most interesting region. Lots of movement overall in terms of like the teams and the expectations. And if we look at the agent meta, also probably, I mean, I guess it's basically the same. 70% Neon. We got very attack sided on Breeze, very attack sided on Haven, Pearl. Lotus split, defensive sided. Not too much to read into this since it's a small sample size, but yeah, everybody is heavy on the Neon, heavy on the Waylay, quite a bit of Sky, still lots of Viper, plus the other smokes. Not a ton of Sentinels being played, although there was definitely a decent amount of Chamber here in EMEA, which I think is good. I think the agent has shown to have a lot of value in the current meta, and I would expect that some teams that have success in stage 1 will probably play that Chamber. Moving on to the pick'ems, missed a few of them. Got the Carmine Core one wrong. Got the Heretics wrong. Gentlemates, so 50-50 for me. In week 2, I'm going to go Giants over Pacific. I'm not confident in this. I think this could go either way. BBL, again, this could also potentially go either way based off of what we saw from Eternal Fire. Very, very interesting series with, the 2 Ascension teams, basically, because this is Ulf rebranded under another org versus BBL, who's also at Ascension. Fnatic Vitality, again, very, very close game. I mean, this entire week is just total bangers. So, like, Vitality Fnatic, this is a 50-50. I went with Vitality just because I think, I don't know, like Durka Revenge, maybe. It's going to be close. Liquid Heretics, also very 50-50. I kind of like what Liquid's cooking. Heretics, they look like they need a little bit more time to figure out like exactly what they want to be doing, but also they looked good. Probably should have won the series, but they didn't. So how does that affect the mental? 50-50 series for me. Foot versus Na'Vi. This one is basically just off of, I was impressed with what I saw from Foot. Na'Vi is still playing with a stand-in, I assume. And I think that they kind of won through, let's just say, like, moments that they probably shouldn't have against Heretics. And if they have to rely too much on the hero plays, then maybe that's a problem. I don't know. Maybe this should be Na'Vi. I don't know. I'm going to go with Foot. Again, kind of 50-50. And then Mates versus Carmine Core. I think this is pretty solidly Mates because I just don't really like what Carmine Core is doing right now. They look a little bit lost in the sauce. But also Mates is kind of in that same spot. So realistically, every single series next week is like a 50-50 for me. I don't know who's going to win any of these. These are my picks. I don't know if they're going to be correct. It is what it is. Okay. Final thing. Normally, I think at the end of these podcasts, I'm going to do like a little Q&A, just take some questions from the comments or chat if we do this live in the future. Today, I just want to address something that has been going on Twitter. I put out a post. I'm just going to put up Valplant and just explain what I'm looking at here. I've been getting hella flamed on Twitter for this. I watched a game where I saw a team throw this wall, which I think is not very good because they're throwing it on eco round and then they're basically just like bunkering in the back of the site. A lot of times teams will do that, or they throw this wall because they want like choke point coverage here and they want, some stall in garage and they want B choke point coverage. What's the best way to put this? Okay, there's 2 good walls on this map, basically. There's the C to window wall, like this. This wall is great because it allows you to flood in without having to worry about a lot of these angles that people would be holding from the attack. It allows you to bunker backside because they have to push through the Viper wall. They have to push through the Viper wall. So you can like hold some interesting angles and kill them as they try to take extra space. Meanwhile, your team can flood in behind the wall as protection. Also, it kind of breaks up the split because there's obviously a wall here. And so and like two phases of having to clear the wall to get into garage. And also it blocks a killjoy turret that is placed here a lot. So you can potentially walk down into aggressive space under a window. So this wall is very good. And then there's another wall that is also very good, which is the Genji wall, which is this one. They made the comp very popular playing this wall, and then they would put an orb here every round with obviously like the turret that everybody kind of hates. But this wall is also very good because it gives you safe rotations across the middle of the map. It, instead of this, the comp that they're playing is not great at fighting for a lobby. So instead what they do is they allow you to take a lobby, but then you have to push through the Viper wall. And usually you're going to let them know if you are trying to push through the Viper wall. And that allows them to get people in position, specifically the Viper. The way that Genji plays this, or the way that they used to play this with Munchkin, is Munchkin plays in the middle of the map. And his job is to essentially gamble to either C or A to meet people as they come in with a molly. Like this is how he plays the map. I watched like hundreds of hours of Genji Haven VODs to try and beat them. We didn't beat them, but I did learn how this comp functions. And so the idea with this wall is you kind of give up B a lot of the time. And if they go B, then when the spike is planted, B is much easier for this comp to retake because you just come in, you paranoia backside, something like that. You molly this, you come in, you put up the wall, you tap the spike, you put the pressure on. Or you fight for C or A. So B is sort of like your third priority, and A and C are your number one priorities. So this wall is good, this setup is good, and then the C to window wall is also good. So then when I see people use this wall, I'm just like, why are people using this wall? Because yes, it gives you the B coverage, yes, it gives you the C coverage, but you can like come into garage and like sneak into garage if there's like a trip here. People are not holding this a lot of the time. The one reason I can really think about this wall being good is if you set up some sort of like trap in here where you can maybe sort of like wait for some contact off of maybe a turret like this, and then they come in, they dart, one person breaks the dart, they try to push, you put up the wall, you cut their team in half, and you sort of like crossfire the guy who's trying to push through this wall or something like that. And then you still obviously have like the choke point coverage. So, I mean, that's fine. But I feel like if you're going to do anything like that, you might as well just be using this wall because it's just better in general for everything else. And the main times that I see people using this wall is when they're on eco rounds. And on eco rounds, one thing that I absolutely hate watching from teams is they're playing eco, they have bad guns, and then they just try to play a normal round, right? Just think about this. You've got like a sheriff, and you still have your Sova just like doing normal stuff over here. You still have like your Viper just like playing in the back, right? You still have your Killjoy, just whatever. Like, doesn't really matter. Everybody just plays like standard, right? And they just try and like take regular fights with bad guns against good guns. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense because your win condition is not your weapons. So your random fights should probably not be your win condition, and you should be trying to do something like weird and different to try and mix it up and make the other team uncomfortable. So this is just like a random wall that I think is kind of fun because what you can do is, let's say you start the round, you walk down like this with maybe a Killjoy, and you have let's say your Neon holding back here, maybe your Viper plays like here with a shotgun, your Sova darts, leaves, goes to B, holds this line. So if somebody walks through this wall into cubby, if they don't walk through the wall, whatever, if they walk through the wall, you can just shoot them as they're decayed. And then you've got your Omen, and so Killjoy, Omen walk down, maybe they all walk down, right? Triple walk down behind this wall initially. Yes, maybe they spam you, maybe you die. It's an eco round. You're supposed to lose the round anyway. But let's say we get to this position, right? And they tap the spike. Maybe you can do some sort of aggressive play, push through, or if there's nobody there, maybe you can just drop an alarm bot aggressively that's protected, and then you come back and you go stack somebody somewhere else. Anyway, I got absolutely cooked on Twitter for this wall, which, in my opinion, you shouldn't be using anyway, because there's two other walls that are good. And I'm just saying that, like, use this once every 2 games just to make the other team uncomfortable. It's not something you use all the time. It's just like a random idea because you're on eco. You're supposed to lose the game. You're supposed to lose that round. If you play normally, you're going to lose the round. So do something different. Make them feel weird. Make them feel uncomfortable. But everybody seems to just think that I'm saying you should use this wall all the time, which is obviously very stupid since there's 2 good walls and good setups that you should be using anyway. So I just wanted to clarify that. Feel free to ask me any questions. Feel free to continue cooking me. It's okay. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let me know. It's sort of like a random rough idea. I've just been watching all of the games, and I just kind of wanted a place to like dump my thoughts about the VCT. And if you guys don't like it, that's cool. Let me know if you did or didn't in the comments. We'll see you next week. I'll have another episode with all the games covered.